My name is Nataya. I work for Orygen Global, and we have the pleasure of also being the co-chairs of the Child and Youth Working Group alongside Steph and Luiz as well. And yes, it's been, I think it's my hair creating that sound. Yes, I'm very excited in the work that I get to do leading strategy and advocacy to support young people, be at the forefront of research, policy and youth participation globally. So before we get started, one of the key things that we wanted to talk through as a child and youth working group that we've been working on for about 8 months now is we're launching a report around guidelines for youth participation, and I wanted to talk through this morning and outline them for you briefly before we go into our discussion with my wonderful panellists, and also as we break out into groups as well. So if that's okay if we get the slides up. Next. Our report on these guiding principles and recommendations for effective lived experience and youth engagement practices was really created from a workshop that we ran at another conference in October last year, where we brought together members across the world to talk about how do we do this, and really hearing the voices of young people, of those working in this space for a long time across the sector. And really the goals of the report were to be a usable resource, to outline simple principles, and to establish a pathway for actionable steps. Now, one thing that I've heard over the last few days is that sometimes there's like a fear or uncertainty around how to do youth participation. I need to do it well, I don't know where to start. And hopefully this resource provides the what and the how as well. So to briefly talk through the principles really quickly, the first is that to make youth engagement a standard practice and how we embed that in the leadership of our organisations. The second is around approaches that extend across disciplines, across sectors, how we collaborating with policymakers around funding bodies, thinking about the political will, which has been talked about across different sessions across the conference. Third, that practices are equitable and inclusive, and how we're reducing barriers to youth engagement. Fourth, that the approaches are flexible, and that they have a creative approach to problem solving these barriers, and how to, I guess, include and promote opportunities as well. The fifth is around clear and simple processes that are safe and effective. The sixth is that different options, that it's flexible in terms of how we involve young people. The next is around how we set up young people, how we train young people, how we equip young people to engage meaningfully. And last is how do we measure the outcomes and impact of engagement as well, and provide that feedback to young people as well. So as we'll percolate some of these principles, we'll talk about them, you'll talk about them, and we hope to really talk through, again, the how in your context, no matter what role you play. I have a few additional resources here that you can take a look at as well, that we've included in the resource, and the guidelines should be coming out at our next Child and Youth Working Group meeting. So just a bit of a plug there to join as well. So this morning on stage, I am joined by these lovely people, and also Sofyen on stage. So I wanted to introduce them briefly to you. So Stephanie, who's on my left hand here, is the head of global impact at Batyr, which focuses on youth peer-to-peer mental health education. And after 9 years, she'll be finishing tomorrow and moving into the role of executive director at Kids Help Phone in Canada. Next, we have Roberto, who is the venture manager of the Centre for Research and Innovation in Mental Health in Brazil. Next, we have Judah, who's the founder of Integrative Wellbeing and Youth Against Suicide, and works at Basic Needs in Kenya. And last on screen, we have Sofyen, who is the program lead for improving mental well-being for the Zurich Foundation. So everyone just give them a warm round of applause as we get started. And just to say before we get started that we have selected our panellists to speak, but not to say that you aren't all experts and doing some of this work as well. So we really look forward to hearing your own examples as we get into things. So Judah, I might start down the end with you. We know that lots of organisations across the world, and we've heard a lot about it at this meeting, are concentrating their efforts on supporting young people in the design, implementation, evaluation, and advocacy. So what do you think is the value of youth participation, and what are some of the examples that you've experienced around how this has been done?
Hello. Answering that question, what is the value of youth participation? I'm sure we've all experienced this, and the first one will be fresh perspectives. The youth are their own experts by experience, yeah? And change is always a constant, and the world evolves. So how you experienced it, also myself, how I experienced it when I turned 18, is not how a current 18-year-old in Kenya is experiencing the world. So having them bring their expertise on from their own experience is really interesting because that's the fresh perspective. The second point will be sustainability. Most of the work that we do is really youth-based and youth-focused. And if you're doing youth-focused work without the youth, then really you're not doing any work at all, because once you're gone, who is taking over this work? Who is it impacting? How is it sustainable? So having the youth there in the design, implementation, and even evaluation of the process is really key in having a sustainable product. And the last thing will be, for the youth in terms of value, when you say that we are addressing mental health challenges invariably affect the youth no matter where you are in the world. And having them as a key stakeholder, having, you know, the famous saying that was coined a few years back, nothing for us without us. So being at the table really makes a difference, because now you're creating a program for you that you can hold on to. And how is this achievable? There were two parts to the question, and I brought my cheat sheet with me. So, number one, this seems rather obvious, but capacity build. Ask the young people, what do you need? Most of the times we tend to have the boardroom effect where, you know, you come up with a good, beautiful idea that will be able to work, and you go to implement it, and then you think, okay, the implementation is not working, the program is not lifting off, it's not scaling at the level we wanted it to. But I can give an example. The unemployment is a huge issue in Kenya, or rather that's what everybody believes, because it is there, it's statistically proven. But then when we went to a youth program with offering employment opportunities, and yes, they listened to us, yes, they engaged, but they were like, okay, cool. We had a session about building your resume, developing your career, balancing your mental health as you do all this. But then they said, okay, we want to venture into our own businesses. We want to start our own things. We want to be entrepreneurs. So if you had a session for us, maybe it's to capacity build us on those skills to be able to maneuver what you want to do in this country. And it seems rather obvious, but yeah, go to the community and ask, okay, what would you like to learn? Based on the conversation yesterday, a build-up of it was a lot of international and global level advocacy has been done. Suicide prevention, mental health awareness, capacity building for mental health. And these are all resources that young people are feeling the impact of on the ground, and they'd want to be part of the journey. So if you ask, okay, where do you want to learn? How can we be able to support, and how can we build programs that do this? It will cause a great difference. The second point will be creating a space. I know this is rather difficult in program implementation because we have we want to achieve the results, we have the monitoring and evaluation tools available. But then if you can create a space for innovative ideas, maybe even a small grant to the youth who will be influenced by your program to start something in their own communities. Because not only now are you implementing a program, but you're actually showing this as a sustainability metrics. We say we are going to move the youth in our community from point A to point B, and now they can move themselves to point C. through doing this. So creating that budget allocation or creating that space for youth to be innovative and really implement programs that are impacted by what you do. And the last one will be platforms for advocacy. We've had this challenge where a lot of the youth feel sidelined by these global movements, that you want to be a part of the mental health advocacy, but you don't know where to start really. So I love the challenge that we were given today. Post, tag us, and maybe you're going to retweet something that somebody said that I'm part of the Global Mental Health Action Network Forum. I'm attending it virtually. How can we be able to amplify those voices by capturing that? Social media has made this a tool. You can capture that, you can retweet. That gives power to a person, not only even young people. That gives you a sense of recognition, because a lot of community work is being done, amazing, amazing community work by nascent organizations, that probably that one retweet will cause so much effect, because they're saying, oh, guess what? The WHO retweeted our tweet on community mental health. That gives somebody that power, the extra power that they need to be able to achieve their goal. So in our communications and advocacy, see somebody who's doing something similar, like Waves for Change today displayed something earlier, and I love that they say that they'd want to share that model across. So if you can be able to also boost other people online through communications in every area that we work in, that will be an amazing, amazing kind of effort, and putting that forth and actually fueling the work that is happening in the community level. Thank you.
Thanks, Judith, for sharing that and that sort of principle around like ask, don't tell, and some of those really practical ways around how to embed that. Thinking about sort of embedding lived experience and prioritizing this, given this really important conversation, the principles in the youth engagement report are really thinking about how can we continue to resource and prioritise this. So Steph, in your work at Batyr, how have you engaged young people and embedded some of the principles in your work?
Yeah, thanks, Nataya. So at Batyr, so that's B-A-T-Y-R if you're looking it up, we run preventative mental health programs for young people by young people in Australia. And so all of our programs aim to reduce stigma and improve help seeking. And so we've been around since 2011, and a big thing for us has been looking at what are the deliberate actions we need to take every single day to ensure that young people with lived experiences and a variety of lived experiences are embedded in the organization at all different levels. And so for us, today we have about 65 permanent staff. We have about 200 casuals or contractors, and they're all young people with a lived experience who are all paid to go through training, learn how to share their lived experience stories in a safe way, and share their stories at our structured evidence-based programs. But for us, so I would say about 85% of staff identify as having a lived experience, and the majority of our team are between 20 to 30 years old. And so for us, though, we wanted to make sure that young people with lived experience are, in all different types of roles at the organization, and this includes in the senior leadership team. And then beyond that, the last few years, we wanted to look at how do we ensure we have representation on our board of directors, but that a young person who joins our board are set up to succeed. And I think that's a core component of the resources that a lot of GMAN members fed into as well, that you'll all be able to see soon. So what we did was we worked with a young person who joined our board of directors, and she attended the same training that our CEO attended to when he joined to our board of directors as well. She was then, she gained a mentor, so has one-on-one mentorship as well. But I think that it's important that it's not just training is provided for the young person who has joined our board, but that also the board members are all there kind of checking, power imbalances and checking themselves and making sure that there are really open conversations on the board, and that what the young person, their experience is one of inclusivity, and that they're able to add their input in really meaningful ways. But we also recognize that, one young person doesn't represent all young people, and a small group of young people still doesn't represent all young people. But what we have done the last few years as well is we developed a national youth advisory group. And so it's a group of young people who have direct connection with our board. And so when we develop our annual strategy every year with our senior leadership team, our board, our risk committee, our finance committee, this national youth advisory group are a part of that conversation. And they help direct our priorities every year as well. I also just want to mention that for us, really making sure that, so a conversation yesterday at the conference was around safety and how do we actually ensure there are safe components when it comes to youth engagement. And so for us, I think kind of what you were referring to, Judah, really making sure that there's autonomy there so that young people have ownership over what support and safety actually looks like for them. And so we have structures in place such as creating kind of well-being or self-care plans with our young people who are involved with the organization, and making sure that it's really clear what actually helps support each individual who's engaged in the organization, and also making sure that there are really clear processes in place that are transparent and communicated to all young people who go through the induction process with us, and making sure these processes are communicated throughout their involvement as well, and that young people have full ownership to be able to step out or step in and have flexibility in terms of their involvement as well. So I might leave it there, but really excited to be able to talk more about the resource and the principles and how it can help, how it can be applied in all of your settings as well.
Thanks, Steph. And I think one thing that resonates in that sort of description is some of those like standard processes across the organization, which really, I guess, create the environment for safe participation, but also intentionally equipping young people as well, and thinking about that compensation element. I think part of that discussion is thinking about equity and inclusion and representation, and those core things really undergird a lot of the principles in the youth engagement report. And Beto, I thought you would be great to ask around that sort of those important parts of equity and inclusion, and some of the ways that at your centre you're sort of trying to support intersectionality in young people in terms of diverse representation as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, actually, before I speak, we have made a video of a pilot case that we are implementing in Brazil. It's called Focus on the Mind. So it's actually, we're putting in practice this environment of creating with youth mental health solutions that they think it's important to be created and implemented. So could you please, yep.
Focus on the mind. 75% of mental health problems occur before the age of 24. Youth mental health is a global priority. But how is mental health currently being addressed in Brazilian public schools? To answer this question, we have started a collaborative action research with specialists and social organizations. The idea was to co-design a whole school approach framework, combining multiple human-centered interventions that could have an impact on school climate, and to guarantee a safe and meaningful participation for the students and the community, we have applied the UNICEF protocol as our roadmap. To introduce the theme, we ran a first experiment. The students were invited to participate in short workshops to discuss both the brain and the mind. They were then engaged into an artistic intervention to express their feelings and emotions. After this activity, we simply listened to the whole school community's perceptions and reflections about mental health. Based on these moments with all the relevant parties, we validated the painful issues and started considering solutions within the school community. The result was a 3-step solution: a mental health impact fair, capacitating teachers, engaging students with living experience. The results so far: all students were involved, 56 solutions designed and presented by the students, a stronger relationship between the entire public mental health support network, possibility to escalate the initiative across the state of Rio Grande do Sul, baseline school climate evaluation with a follow-up plan for 2023, but the greatest lesson is that we need to listen to and make room for the youth as the protagonists in designing mental health solutions for schools and communities.
So this is the case that we're currently being implemented. Actually, we should be scaling now to the university context and environment. The key idea here is to make these youth protagonists as the changes they want to see in place, and actually advocating for their own reality creation and development. So the follow-up of this project, we are currently launching a grand Open Innovation Challenge in Youth Mental Health within the Center for Innovation. And the key thing here is not just provide, of course it's important to provide the spaces to hear the youth, to be sensitive about their needs, but also how can we evaluate a few interventions and evaluate the outcomes of it. So what we are doing is actually, it's a research in which we are trying to evaluate the impact on the climate of the school. And one thing that's important is also involving the multiple stakeholders. So we are just not listening to the youth, but sometimes the teachers are also in need of some assistance in order to provide this safe environment for the youth to be sharing their experiences and developing the initiatives that they want to see in place.
Thanks, Beto. And I think one of, as you said, sort of how do we collaborate and how do we look outside just the mental health sector, but thinking about education, thinking about families, thinking about design as well, which some people might feel uncomfortable with as well, thinking.
And also use, we have lots of frameworks. So for example, in the school, use Design for Change. So it's a quite simple methodology in which you empower the youth to be creating their own solutions. But also, you need to be connecting the support network. So if you're doing this in school, and if the kid needs any kind of system, which services are there for, have them supported, I mean. So it's all about, in my perspective, to try to unify an agenda. So the problem is over there. Everybody agrees that the problem is over there. So how can we interconnect these different stakeholders in order to achieve a common goal? So I think that this is the key challenge that we have in order to make it scalable and impactful, and not just to impact one school, but to impact the whole country and all the world. I think that's our purpose and our mission here.
And I think just on that too, something that I think Nataya, Luiz, Sofyen, and I as co-chairs of the Child and Youth Working Group hear a lot about is all of these amazing services, interventions in schools, in communities, in sports, all these different frameworks and processes that exist. But one of the recommendations in the resource that we really want to call out is how do we actually make the most of sharing a lot of these frameworks and learnings and resources so that we're not duplicating efforts. And we're talking so much about the lack of funding that exists when it comes to youth mental health. And we're so grateful for so many wonderful funders here supporting us to be at this conference today. But I think if we can look at how do we not just fund these interventions and services, but also fund that ability for us to share knowledge, share learnings, try new things, and then share those things with each other. I think if we can shift the dial on maybe where some of that funding goes to, that can make a huge difference. And so I really hope to see, as GMIN members into the future, we can use the Circle platform, go to meetings, and really look at how we can share resources, some of these processes, frameworks, just put them online and have discussions around them too, because I think the more we make the most of networks like this, the more we can actually do good stuff together as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think that we also need to be looking at generating evidence. I mean, we can be sharing stories, we can sharing cases, but what's true impact that we are causing? I think that that's the key thing for us to actually be scaling this kind of initiatives.
I think an example for us, a program that we did talking about interlinking stakeholders and the different actors, was the Youth First program. It has been implemented in like 5 countries now, and recently it has been implemented in Kenya. And I like the point that you were saying about involving people doesn't necessarily mean that it's just mental health focused. Like one of the things we did for the textbook of the Youth First Kenya program, the logo or the design was given to the students to, okay, how can you be able to do this? Or how will you be able to design? A person with lived experience. That's one way to create that inroad. It doesn't have to be those strong conversations. And now it's the teachers facilitating the program. And that's a way to now bring the school community into actually implementing this resources that we are teaching the children. And yes, that will be a challenge to every one of us. When you're implementing a program, also think about how can we teach it and how can we be able to share this learning experience with others, not only in good platforms such as the Gman platform, but also start thinking about how can I be able to share this with my immediate community. And that way you can be able to develop a resource that even if it comes to this global platform, you can be able to track and share it and capture the evidence of the change that occurred during that process. Yeah.
I think one thing just to add to this discussion is I think from running sort of the advocacy training program that we run at Orygen, one of the things is the young people have said to us that it's about seeing someone like them that they could become as well. And I think not just seeing one advocate and one young person, but many young people from that they can identify with doing the things that they would like to see change. And I think some of these programs supporting youth-led solutions do that. And we've heard lots of great examples. Sofyen, thank you for joining us. And I think another initiative that you're running, you're bringing together 400,000 young people, which is more than just one, that is definitely many, in partnership with UNICEF around supporting globally mental health care. And it's like a lot of young people, a big reach. So what are some of the innovative ways that you're thinking about how we reach this amount of young people, thinking about this like equity and inclusion sort of principles as well in the work that you do?
Thank you so much, and again, thank you for inviting me to participate online. Hi everyone from Zurich. So, thank you for the question indeed. This partnership we have started a year and a half ago with UNICEF covers for now 7 countries, which are namely Ecuador, Colombia, and Mexico for the Latin America region, and Nepal, Vietnam, the Maldives, and Indonesia for the Asian Pacific region. Surely, I mean, we resort to several innovative pathways to create this impact. And there are, I'd say, 3 core programmatic components to make this happen. The first one we resort to, which is targeting possible countries but also having a global reach, is the global campaign called #OnMyMind. You may have certainly seen this campaign being activated in your own network now for more than a year. And the idea here is to tailor and design assets that are both tailored for youth in the respective context and also for caregivers. So basically it's really about building up an ecosystem, leveraging on the power of digital content and digital platforms. This content unfolds in platforms such as LinkedIn, Instagram. There's also the On My Mind platform per se that has got a series of articles, always tackling a different topic that relates to mental well-being, prevention, and promotion. On the top of this, we also work with ambassadors. And for this campaign, I think the power of ambassadors for young people to identify to is key. And this is how we try to unlock discussions about mental health in a given family, in a given school, community, and at country level. The other innovation that we resort to, and I think I connect very much with what Stephanie said about sharing tools and knowledge, is that with UNICEF we have designed 2 series of materials or packages, one to work with youth groups, the other one to work with caregivers. Those materials are currently being piloted in several countries, and they should be open source from next year onwards. And totally, instead of replicating always in a way the creation of materials, we can also leverage on what we have at hand, share, expand reach, and contextualize those materials to given settings. This is how we work with UNICEF. I think at the end, it's also very interesting to see how mental well-being is being both a universal topic, but also very specific to context. So the cultural adaptation of these core thematic pillars is key to the success to make sure that we can indeed impact positively this number of thousands of people you mentioned.
Thanks, Sofyen. And that point there at the end around, like, I guess the sharing widely, but adapting deeply to context as well is such an important point to bring to this discussion. I know that in talking to you and with others, that there's a summit coming up that you're part of, that the Zurich Foundation's part of. Can you tell us a bit more about how you'll involve young people in that summit?
Totally, thank you. You may all be knowledgeable about the One Young World Network. So One Young World is a network of young leaders that takes place in many forms. And this can be through a global community of young leaders, but there's also an in-person summit happening in Belfast early October. Here at the Batyr Foundation, we will lead on several mental health events, and this translates in panel discussions, roundtables, thematic dinner, for instance. Here the goal is, at one end, young people all over the world recognize mental health and mental well-being as one of their priority topics. So this summit will enable everyone to come together from all continents in the world and really build on this momentum. Connect people, build up on best practices, share certain models that have been impactful in similar settings. The point of this summit is really to leverage, as you're doing right now in Cape Town, on the in-person connections of young leaders. From the Zurich Foundation, we are also bringing 15 young leaders to this event in October from almost all the parts of the world. And we also enable these young leaders to pitch for their mental health innovations and be awarded seed funding from the foundation to increase the impact of their proposed initiatives. So this is like a 360 type of support we bring to young leaders in the mental health space there, but I think with a lot of humility, it will be an amazing source of learning for me as well.
Thanks, Sofyen, and excited to hear more about it and how also our members at GMAN can get involved and sort of amplify what you're doing as well. Speaking of what everybody is doing in the room and online, we wanted to use this next moment, so we'll have about half an hour now to get into 4 groups to talk through the principles that we are speaking to in today's discussion, for everyone to share around how are you implementing these principles in your practice, and how can we progress the implementation of these principles, and who do we need to bring into this conversation to do that. So what we're going to do is split up the room. So we'll have 4 groups here in person. So if maybe the first 4 rows here on the left-hand side, and then the back 4 rows, and then we'll have the first 4 rows here, and then the last 4 rows there, and online will be 1 group as well. What we'll do is have about 10 minutes to talk to 2 principles and discuss with your group how you're implementing them, how we can progress implementation, and then the facilitators will rotate, and then at the end we'll bring together some of those insights. So what I might do is assign some facilitators first. So maybe Luiz, do you want to take this group here? This one here, and then Steph at the back, and then Judah the right, and then I'll do this one here. Okay. So if everyone wants to make their groups, and then we'll come back together in about half an hour.